pup wasn't breathing when Mira found him in the snow. She had been gathering firewood near the frozen stream behind her cottage when she heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound where sound should be. A wrongness in the winter air that made her stop and listen. That's when she saw the small bundle of grey fur half buried in a snowdrift, perfectly still, frost already forming on its tiny body. Mira dropped her firewood and ran. She didn't think about her weak omega body or her damaged lungs that made running painful. She just moved, falling to her knees beside the pup, her bare hands sinking into the snow. He was so cold, so impossibly cold. His little chest didn't rise or fall. His eyes were closed. His paws were stiff. "No," she whispered, scooping him into her arms. "No, no, no. Come on, little one. Please." She pressed him against her chest and ran back to her cottage, her breath coming in painful gasps. The other Omegas in the pack said she was too weak to survive winters alone out here at the edge of pack territory. They said her damaged lungs would kill her before spring came. But Mira had survived 3 winters already, through sheer stubborn will, and she wasn't about to let this pup die because she couldn't run fast enough. Inside her cottage, she laid him on the floor near the fire and grabbed every blanket she owned. She wrapped him tight, rubbing his tiny body, trying to force warmth back into him. His fur was so soft under her hands. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, too young to survive on his own, too young to be abandoned in the snow. "Breathe," she begged, pressing her ear to his chest. Nothing. No heartbeat. No breath. "Please breathe." Mira had been alone for 5 years. 5 years since the accident that damaged her lungs and marked her as defective. 5 years since her own pack shunned her, since her family stopped visiting, since she learned what it meant to be truly unwanted. In all that time, she had spoken to maybe a dozen wolves total, and most of those conversations were just her picking up supplies at the pack border. But this pup, this tiny frozen creature, needed her in a way no one ever had. She bent down and breathed into his small mouth, the way she'd seen healers do once. 1 breath, 2 breaths. She pressed gently on his chest, counting in her head. 1, 2, 3. Another breath. 1, 2, 3. Her own lungs burned with the effort, each exhale scraping against the scar tissue that would never fully heal. "Come on," she gasped between breaths. "You didn't survive out there just to die in here. Come on, little warrior. Fight." 1 more breath. 1 more compression. And then, impossibly, wonderfully, his chest moved on its own. A tiny, shuddering breath. Then another. His little body convulsed, and he coughed, his eyes fluttering open for just a moment before closing again. Mira sobbed with relief, pulling him close. That's it, sweet boy. You're okay. I've got you." She held him for hours that first night, keeping him warm against her body, dripping warm broth into his mouth whenever he seemed alert enough to swallow. He was so weak, so fragile. But he was alive, and that was enough. By morning, his breathing had steadied. By afternoon, his eyes opened fully, revealing the most striking amber color Mira had ever seen. Not the normal yellow or brown of wolf pups, but true amber, like honey held up to sunlight. He looked at her with those eyes and made a small sound, almost like he was saying thank you. "You're welcome," Mira whispered, stroking his head. "I'm Mira, and you're going to be okay. I promise." She named him Ash because of his grey fur and because he had risen from near death like something born from flames. Over the next few days, she learned his personality. He was curious, always trying to explore despite his weak legs. He was brave, growling his tiny puppy growl at shadows. And he was affectionate, always curling up against her neck when he slept, his small heartbeat steady against her throat. For the first time in 5 years, Mira's cottage didn't feel empty. A week passed, then 2. Ash grew stronger every day. His legs steadied. His growl deepened just a little. He started eating solid food, though Mira had to mash it up first. She spent her days caring for him, talking to him, teaching him which plants were safe to nibble and which would make him sick. "See this one," she said, holding up a sprig of wintergreen. "This is good, helps with a sore stomach. But this one, the one with the red berries, stay far away from that." Ash yipped and batted at the wintergreen, making Mira laugh. She laughed more in those 2 weeks than she had in 2 years. But on the 15th day, everything changed. Mira was outside splitting firewood when she felt it. A pressure in the air, like the world was holding its breath. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind. Even the stream seemed to stop its gurgling. She turned slowly, the axe heavy in her hands, and that's when she saw them. 3 massive wolves are emerging from the tree line, each one twice the size of any normal wolf. Their fur was black as midnight, their eyes glowing silver in the winter sun. But it was the one in the middle that made Mira's blood run cold. He was larger than the others, his black fur shot through with silver streaks. Power radiated from him in waves that made her Omega instincts scream at her to submit, to bow, to bare her throat. This wasn't just an alpha. This was something far more dangerous. The 3 wolves shifted as they approached, their bodies rippling and changing until 3 men stood before her. The 2 flanking guards were intimidating enough in their black leather and silver weapons. But the one in the center made Mira forget how to breathe. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face all hard angles and sharp edges. His black hair fell to his shoulders, silver streaking through it like lightning through a night sky. His eyes were pure silver, no iris, no pupil, just that otherworldly glow. He wore black and silver armor that marked him as royalty, and when he spoke, his voice was deep enough to make the ground vibrate. "Where is he?" Mira's hands shook on the axe handle. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's silver eyes narrowed. He took a step forward, and Mira's Omega instincts screamed. She stumbled back, the axe falling from her hands. Her damaged lungs struggled to pull in air. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. "Don't lie to me, Omega." His voice was cold, commanding. "I can smell him, the pup. Where is he?" Inside the cottage, Ash started barking. His high puppy bark, so different from the deep howls of adult wolves. The man's head snapped toward the sound, and something flickered across his face. Relief? Fear? Mira couldn't tell. "Stay away from him," Mira gasped, even though she knew it was useless. What could a broken Omega do against whatever this man was? He ignored her, walking past her toward the cottage. His guards moved to follow, but he waved them back. Mira scrambled after him, her lungs burning. "Please," she wheezed, "please don't hurt him." The man stopped at her door, his hand on the handle. He looked back at her, and for just a moment, his expression softened. "Hurt him? I'm here to save him." He opened the door and stepped inside. Mira followed, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Ash was in his basket by the fire, standing on shaky legs, his tiny teeth bared in the most adorable attempt at being threatening Mira had ever seen. The man dropped to one knee, and Mira watched in shock as his fearsome expression crumbled. His silver eyes went wide. His mouth opened slightly. His hand reached out, trembling, and stopped just short of touching Ash. "Kael," he breathed. "Gods above, it's really you." Ash stopped growling. He tilted his head, studying the man with those strange amber eyes. Then, to Mira's complete shock, Ash's tail started wagging. He took a wobbly step forward, then another, until he reached the man's outstretched hand. He sniffed it once, then licked it, his whole body wiggling with excitement. The man made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. He scooped Ash into his arms, cradling him against his chest. "I thought you were dead. I thought they killed you." Mira stood frozen, watching this powerful, terrifying man hold her pup with infinite gentleness. Her pup, not his. She'd saved him. She'd brought him back from death. She'd spent weeks nursing him, loving him, making him strong. "He's mine," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The man looked up at her, and she saw tracks of tears on his face. "What?" "He's mine." Louder now, despite her fear. "I found him. I saved him. He's my pup." The man stood slowly, Ash still cradled in one arm. "Do you have any idea who this is?" "His name is Ash." "His name," the man said, his voice gentle but firm, "is Kael, Crown Prince, of the Lycan bloodline, heir to the throne of the Northern Territories, and he's my son." The world tilted sideways. Mira grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. "Your son? He was taken 3 weeks ago, stolen from his nursery by traitors who wanted to end the royal line. We've been searching ever since." The man's silver eyes bore into hers. "Where did you find him?" "In the snow," Mira whispered. "By the stream. He wasn't breathing. He was frozen." The man's jaw clenched. "They left him to die." He looked down at Ash, at Kael, with such fierce love that Mira felt it in her chest. "But you saved him. I didn't know he was a prince. I just knew he needed help. And you gave it." The man studied her, really looked at her for the first time. "You're sick. Your lungs." It wasn't a question. Mira wrapped her arms around herself. "An accident. 5 years ago. They're damaged. I manage. And yet you ran through the snow to save him. You breathed your own damaged breath into him to bring him back." The man's voice was softer now. "What's your name, Omega?" "Mira. Mira." He said it like he was tasting the word. "I am Darius, Lycan King of the Northern Territories, and I owe you a debt I can never repay." Mira's knees went weak. Lycan King. Not just an alpha. Not just royalty. The Lycan King. The most powerful wolf in all the territories. She'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. They said he was ruthless, that he could kill with a look, that his wolf was more beast than man. They said he'd taken the throne by force 20 years ago and held it through strength alone. And she'd just told him that his son was hers. "I need to take him home," Darius said. "His mother is waiting. The whole kingdom mourns, thinking him dead." Something broke inside Mira's chest. Of course he had a mother waiting, a queen, a family, a palace, everything Mira could never give him. But the thought of handing Ash over, of never seeing his amber eyes or hearing his puppy bark again, of being alone in this cottage once more, was unbearable. "Can I say goodbye?" Her voice cracked on the words. Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then he held Ash out to her. Mira took him, burying her face in his soft fur. He licked her cheek, sensing her distress, whining softly. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much, little warrior. Be good. Be strong. Remember that someone wanted you. Remember that you were loved." She kissed his small head and handed him back to Darius before she could change her mind, before she could do something stupid like refuse to let go. Darius took him carefully, his silver eyes never leaving Mira's face. "You'll come with us," he said. Mira blinked. "What?" "You saved the Crown Prince. You brought him back from death. You cared for him when he was at his weakest." Darius shifted Ash to one arm and held out his other hand to Mira. "The kingdom will want to thank you. More than that, Kael will want you near. Look at him." Mira looked. Ash was staring at her, his little paws reaching toward her, whining. "He knows you're his," Darius said quietly. "Whatever we call it, whatever the blood says, you're his mother now too. And I will not separate a mother from her pup. But I'm just an Omega, a broken one. You're the woman who saved my son." Darius's hand was still extended. "Come with us, please." Mira looked at her cottage, at the life she'd built out of loneliness and survival. Then she looked at Ash, at those amber eyes that had brought light back into her world. She took Darius's hand. His grip was warm and strong, and when their skin touched, something electric passed between them. Darius's eyes widened slightly, and Mira felt it too. A connection, sudden and fierce, like recognition. But before she could process it, he was pulling her gently toward the door. "We leave now," he said. "Pack nothing. Everything you need will be provided. But trust me, Mira." And for reasons she couldn't explain, she did. The journey to the palace took 3 hours in a carriage that moved faster than any Mira had seen. She sat across from Darius, Ash curled in her lap, his small body warm against her stomach. The Lycan King watched them both, with an intensity that made Mira's skin prickle. But every time she met his eyes, he looked away first. "Tell me how you found him," Darius said as they rolled through snowy forests. Every detail. So Mira did. She told him about the wrongness in the air, the way the forest had gone silent, how Ash wasn't breathing when she found him. She told him about the compressions, the breathing, the hours of keeping him warm. She didn't tell him about the tears, about how she'd begged a pup who couldn't hear her to please just live, about how his first breath had felt like her own resurrection. Darius listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hands clenched on his knees. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The traitors," he finally said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "They'll be found. They'll pay for what they did." "Who were they?" "Members of my own guard. Wolves I trusted." His silver eyes flashed with rage. "They believed the royal line had grown too powerful, that Lycans should rule by council instead of crown. They thought killing Kael would fracture the kingdom enough to let them seize control." Mira held Ash tighter. "But he's just a baby, which is exactly why they targeted him. Kill the heir, kill the future." Darius leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But they failed. Because of you." "I just did what anyone would do." "No." His voice was firm. "Most wolves would have left him. An Omega alone, barely surviving winter. Most would have counted the cost too high. But you didn't hesitate, did you?" Mira thought about that moment in the snow, the instant she'd seen Ash's tiny body. "No, I didn't think. I just moved. That's what makes you different." Darius reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched Ash's head. His large hand completely covered the pup's skull. "That's what makes you worthy." Before Mira could ask what he meant, the carriage slowed. She looked out the window, and her breath caught. The palace rose before them, like a mountain of white stone and silver spires, so massive it seemed to touch the low winter clouds. Guards in black and silver lined the courtyard, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all standing at attention. "I can't go in there," Mira said, panic rising in her throat. "Look at me. I'm nobody. I'm wearing clothes with patches. My hair hasn't been properly cut in years. I don't know how to act around royalty." Darius's expression softened. "You don't need to know anything except how to be yourself. That's all I ask." The carriage door opened. Darius stepped out first, then turned to offer Mira his hand. She took it, clutching Ash to her chest with her other arm, and stepped down into a world she'd only ever heard about in stories. Every guard dropped to one knee, every head bowed. The silence was absolute. Darius's voice rang out across the courtyard. "The prince lives. Crown Prince Kael has returned." The silence shattered into cheers so loud Mira flinched. Ash buried his face against her neck, frightened by the noise. She stroked his back, murmuring soft reassurances, and didn't notice the way every wolf in that courtyard watched her, didn't see the looks of shock and wonder as they realized the Omega holding their prince. Darius led her inside, through hallways so grand that Mira felt dizzy. Everything was marble and silver, tapestries and chandeliers, luxury beyond imagination. Servants bowed as they passed. Nobles pressed against the walls to give them space. And through it all, Darius kept his hand on the small of Mira's back, guiding her, protecting her. They reached a set of massive double doors guarded by 4 Lycans. Darius nodded to them, and they pushed the doors open, revealing a chamber decorated in soft blues and silvers. A nursery, Mira realized. Kael's nursery. A woman stood at the window, her back to them. She was tall, elegant, and wearing a gown of midnight blue. Her black hair fell in waves down her back. When she turned, Mira saw eyes the same amber color as ashes. "Darius, if this is another false report, I swear I'll—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes locking on Ash in Mira's arms. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, it can't be." "It is," Darius said, his voice thick with emotion. "Selene, our son is alive." Selene crossed the room in 3 long strides, her hands reaching for Ash. Mira's arms tightened instinctively, and she hated herself for it. This was his mother, his real mother. But Selene stopped, her hands hovering, her eyes meeting Mira's. "May I?" she asked softly. Mira nodded, not trusting her voice, and handed Ash over. Selene took him with trembling hands, pulling him close, her face buried in his fur. Sobs shook her shoulders, raw and painful to hear. "My baby," she wept. "My sweet baby, you came back to me." Darius moved to his mate's side, wrapping his arms around both her and Kael. They stood there, a family reunited, and Mira felt like an intruder. She took a step back toward the door, thinking she could slip away, but Darius's head snapped up. "Stay," he commanded. Then, softer, "Please, stay." Selene pulled back from Ash, wiping her eyes, and really looked at Mira for the first time. "Who are you?" "This is Mira," Darius said. "She found Kael in the snow. She saved his life." Selene's amber eyes went wide. She looked from Mira to Ash, and back again. Then she did something that shocked Mira to her core. She bowed. The Queen of the Northern Territories, still holding her son, bowed to an Omega nobody. "Thank you," Selene said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for bringing him back to us. I just did what anyone would." "Stop saying that," Darius interrupted gently. "Stop diminishing what you did." Mira's throat tightened. She'd spent 5 years believing she was worthless, a burden, defective. Hearing these 2 powerful wolves thank her, seeing the genuine gratitude in their eyes, was almost too much to bear. Ash squirmed in Selene's arms, turning his head toward Mira. He whined, his little paws reaching. Selene's brow furrowed. "He wants you," she said, surprise in her voice. "He's been with me for weeks," Mira explained. "He probably just needs time to adjust." But even as she said it, she moved closer, and Ash's whining stopped the moment she was near enough to touch. He leaned toward her, nearly falling out of Selene's arms in his eagerness. Selene laughed, though it sounded watery. "He's imprinted on you." "What does that mean?" Darius and Selene exchanged a look. It was Darius who answered. "Royal Lycans imprint on their caretakers. It's an ancient magic, a bond that can't be broken. Kael has bonded with you, Mira. You're his second mother now, in every way that matters." Mira's legs went weak. "But I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who lives in the woods. I can't be a second mother to a prince." "You already are," Selene said. She walked over and gently placed Ash in Mira's arms. The pup immediately settled, curling against her chest, his breathing evening out. "Look at him. He's at peace with you. That's not something we can fake or force. The bond has been chosen." "What does that mean for me?" Mira asked, fear and hope warring in her chest. "It means you stay," Darius said. "Here, in the palace. Kael will need you as he grows, and we—" He glanced at Selene, who nodded. "We would be honored if you'd accept a place in our family." "I don't understand." Selene smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. It means you're not alone anymore, Mira. It means you have a home, if you want it. Mira looked down at Ash, at his tiny face so peaceful in sleep. She thought about her cottage, cold and empty. She thought about 5 years of loneliness, of being unwanted, of believing she had nothing to offer the world. And she thought about this moment, standing in a palace with a queen and king who looked at her like she mattered. "I want it," she whispered. "I want it so much." Selene pulled her into a gentle hug, careful not to crush Ash between them. "Then welcome home, Mira. Welcome home." That night, Mira was given a room 3 doors down from the nursery. It was bigger than her entire cottage, with a bed so soft she was afraid to lie on it, a fireplace that actually worked without smoking, and windows that looked out over the palace gardens. Servants brought her hot water for a bath, clean clothes in her size, and more food than she could eat in a week. But despite the luxury, Mira couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ash alone in the nursery, wondering if he was scared, if he was calling for her. Around midnight, she gave up and crept down the hallway in her new nightgown. The nursery door was cracked open. Soft candlelight spilled out. Mira peeked inside and froze. Darius sat in a rocking chair beside Kael's crib, the pup cradled in his arms. He was humming something low and rhythmic, his silver eyes soft in the candlelight. He looked nothing like the fearsome Lycan King who had emerged from the forest. He looked like a father holding his son, grateful beyond words to have him back. Mira must have made a sound because Darius's head turned. His eyes met hers, and instead of anger at the intrusion, he smiled. "Can't sleep either?" he asked quietly. Mira shook her head, stepping into the room. "I kept thinking he might need me. He's been restless, waking every few minutes." Darius looked down at Ash. "I think he's looking for you. May I?" Darius stood and brought Ash to her. The moment the pup was in her arms, he settled with a contented sigh. Mira walked to the window, rocking gently, and Darius followed. "You're good with him," he observed. "I love him." The words came out before Mira could stop them. "I know he's not really mine, but I love him like he is. He is yours." Darius's voice was firm. "The bond doesn't lie. You're his mother just as much as Selene is. You gave him life twice, once in the snow and once through love. That's not something that can be taken away." Mira looked up at him. Really looked. He was handsome in a harsh way, all sharp edges and hard lines. But his eyes were kind when he looked at his son, kind when he looked at her. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "I'm nobody, a broken omega from nowhere." "You keep saying that," Darius said, "and it's not true. Yes, you're an omega. Yes, your lungs are damaged. But broken?" He shook his head. "Mira, you survived 5 years alone in conditions that would kill most wolves. You saved my son with nothing but your will and your breath. You loved him when you thought he was just a lost pup, expecting nothing in return. That's not broken. That's strength." Tears pricked Mira's eyes. "You don't know me. Then let me." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "Let me know you. Let us know you. You're part of this family now. You're part of my son's life. That means you're important to me." The way he said it, the intensity in his silver eyes, made Mira's breath catch. There was something there, something more than gratitude. But before she could name it, Ash stirred in her arms, yawning widely. Darius smiled. "Someone's tired. Let me put him in his crib." He took Ash carefully and placed him in the ornate crib, tucking soft blankets around him. Ash's eyes drifted shut almost immediately. Darius stood there a moment, his hand on his son's tiny chest, feeling him breathe. "I thought I'd lost him," he said quietly. "I thought I'd failed as a father and a king. I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I'd never see him again." Mira moved to his side, placing her hand over his on Ash's chest. "But you didn't lose him. He's here. He's safe. He's loved." Darius turned his hand over, capturing hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. Because of you. They stood there in the candlelight, hands joined over a sleeping pup, and Mira felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been frozen for 5 years was starting to thaw. Something that had been broken was starting to heal. I should go, she whispered, though she didn't move. You should stay. Darius's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Stay with him, with us. Always, always a long time. Not long enough. His silver eyes burned into hers. Mira, I need to tell you something. What? When I touched you earlier, in your cottage, I felt... He stopped, searching for words. There's a connection between us. I know you felt it too. Mira's heart hammered. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He pulled her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heart. She could feel it racing under her palm. This doesn't happen by accident. The bond, the recognition, it means something. You have a mate, Mira said desperately. Celine, the queen. Celine is my chosen mate. Yes. We love each other deeply, but Lycans can have more than one true mate. His voice dropped lower. And every instinct in my body is telling me that you're mine. Mira jerked her hand back like she'd been burned. No, that's not possible. I'm an Omega. You're the Lycan King. This is just gratitude, or maybe some kind of mistake. It's not a mistake. Darius stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. And it's not gratitude. I've felt this kind of bond once before, with Celine. I know what it is. Does she know? Mira's voice was barely a whisper. Does she know you think I'm your mate? She suspected before I did. Darius smiled softly. Celine is perceptive. She saw the way I looked at you, the way I couldn't stay away from you on the journey here. She's the one who suggested I tell you. This is insane. Mira backed toward the door. I can't be your mate. I can't be part of this. I'm not made for palace life, for politics, for whatever this is. Mira, no. She wrapped her arms around herself. I came here for Ash, for Kael. That's all. I'll help raise him because he needs me. But nothing more. I can't give anything more. Darius's expression shuttered. I understand. The bond can't be forced. But Mira, he waited until she looked at him. It won't go away just because you deny it. It'll only get stronger. Mira fled. She ran back to her room and locked the door, leaning against it, her heart racing. Her damaged lungs burned with the exertion, each breath painful. She slid down to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. This was too much. All of it. The palace, the luxury, the queen's kindness, and now this. The Lycan King claimed she was his mate. It was like a fairy tale, except fairy tales didn't happen to broken Omegas who lived alone in the woods. Fairy tales happened to beautiful, whole people who deserved them. But as she sat there in the dark, her hand moved to her chest, where Darius had placed it over his heart. She could still feel the warmth of his skin, the racing of his pulse, and deep inside, in a place she'd locked away 5 years ago, something responded. Something that recognized him the way he'd recognized her. Mate, her wolf whispered. Our mate. No, Mira told it firmly. We don't get mates. We don't get happy endings. We get survival, and that's enough. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. The next morning, Mira woke to a knock on her door. A servant stood outside with a breakfast tray and an invitation written in elegant script. The Queen requests your presence in the Solar at 9 o'clock. Mira's stomach churned. She'd avoided Celine last night, had hidden in her room like a coward. Now she had to face the woman whose mate she'd apparently bonded with, the woman who had every right to hate her. She dressed in one of the simple gowns provided, braided her hair, and made her way to the Solar with trembling hands. Guards directed her to a bright room filled with windows and morning sun. Celine sat at a small table, tea already poured, looking radiant in a gown of pale gold. "Mira," she said warmly, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Please sit. Have some tea." Mira sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. "Your Majesty, Selene," the Queen interrupted gently. "Just Selene. We're family now, remember?" "I don't know if we are." Mira forced herself to meet Selene's eyes. "Not after last night." Selene tilted her head. "Did Darius tell you about the bond?" "Yes." "And you ran?" It wasn't a question. Mira's cheeks burned. "I didn't know what else to do. This is your mate, your husband, your kingdom. I don't belong here, and I certainly don't belong between you." Selene was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea. Then she set down her cup and leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story, Mira. 20 years ago, I was a princess in a small territory, meant to marry an alpha twice my age to secure an alliance. I was miserable, trapped, certain my life was over before it began. Then Darius came. He was young then, newly crowned, fierce and powerful. He took one look at me and challenged my betrothed to single combat for the right to court me. He won. He destroyed him." Selene smiled at the memory. "Then he gave me a choice. He said he felt the mate bond with me, that I was his true mate. But he wouldn't force me. I could go home, marry the alpha if I wished, and he'd never bother me again. Or I could choose him, choose the bond." "You chose him." "I chose him," Selene confirmed. "And it was the best decision of my life. But here's what I learned about Darius. He doesn't love in halves. When he loves, it's absolute, consuming, eternal. And Lycan Kings don't have just one mate, Mira. They have as many as the bond chooses. It's rare, but it happens." Mira's throat went tight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw the way he looked at you, the way you looked at him." Selene's amber eyes were kind. "Because I felt the bond too when I touched you yesterday. Not the same as Darius's bond, but a sister bond, a co-mate bond. You're meant to be part of this family, Mira, part of our pack, part of us." "I'm broken," Mira whispered. "My lungs don't work right. I can't shift properly because of it. I'm weak, defective. Why would the bond choose me?" Selene reached across the table and took Mira's hands. "The bond doesn't make mistakes. It chose you because of who you are, not despite it. You're strong, Mira, stronger than you know. You survived alone for 5 years. You saved my son. You loved him without knowing he was a prince, without expecting anything in return. That's the kind of strength kingdoms are built on." Tears spilled down Mira's cheeks. "I'm scared." "I know." Selene squeezed her hands. "Change is terrifying. Love is terrifying. But you don't have to face it alone. You have Darius. You have me. You have Kael. You have a whole family now, if you'll let us in." "What if I'm not good enough?" "You already are." Selene smiled. "You already are, Mira. You just need to believe it." They talked for hours, Selene sharing stories about Darius, about palace life, about what it meant to be mated to a Lycan king. She didn't pressure Mira, didn't demand anything. She just talked and listened, and slowly, Mira felt the fear in her chest start to ease. When Mira finally returned to her room that afternoon, she found Darius waiting outside her door. He looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that seemed wrong for a king. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I shouldn't have pushed last night. I shouldn't have told you about the bond so soon. You just got here, you're still adjusting, and I—" "Darius," Mira interrupted softly. "Stop." He fell silent, his silver eyes searching her face. "I talked to Selene," Mira said. "She told me about co-mates, about how the bond works for Lycans. Did she tell you that you have a choice?" Darius stepped closer. "Because you do, Mira. Always. The bond is there, but you don't have to accept it. You can stay here, help raise Kael, and nothing else has to change. I'll respect whatever you decide." Mira looked at this powerful man, This king who could command armies, but stood before her, offering her all the choice in the world. She thought about 5 years of loneliness, of being unwanted. She thought about Ash curled in her arms, trusting her completely. She thought about Celine's kindness, her acceptance. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this, how to be part of something this big." "Neither did I when I became king." Darius smiled. "I learned. We'll learn together. What if I'm not enough? You're everything." He reached out slowly and cupped her face, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "You're everything, Mira. You just don't see it yet. Teach me," she whispered. "Teach me to see it." Darius's smile was like a sunrise. "Every day, I promise." He leaned in slowly, so slowly, until his forehead rested against hers. Not a kiss, not yet. Just closeness, just a connection. And for the first time in 5 years, Mira let herself hope. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mira divided her time between helping care for Kael, learning palace protocols from Selene, and spending time with Darius. He was patient with her fears, gentle with her uncertainties. He never pushed, never demanded. He just showed up, day after day, proving through actions that she mattered. He taught her to read the political reports that came across his desk. He walked with her through the gardens, listening to her talk about herbs and healing. He sat with her in the evenings while Kael played at their feet, his presence steady and warm. Selene became her closest friend, her sister in all but blood. They shared tea in the mornings, discussing everything from palace gossip to their fears about raising Kael. Selene never showed an ounce of jealousy, only acceptance and love. But despite the happiness, despite feeling more at home than she ever had, Mira still struggled. The nobles whispered about her, this Omega nobody who lived in the royal wing. The servants were respectful but distant. And every night, Mira went to her own room, alone, while Darius and Selene shared theirs. "You're thinking too much," Selene observed one morning as they dressed Kael in his princely clothes. "I can see it in your face." "I don't fit here," Mira said quietly. "The nobles look at me like I'm a stray dog you let into the house. The servants don't know what to call me. I'm not a queen, not a consort, not anything official. I'm just here." Selene set down the tiny jacket she'd been buttoning. "Is that what you want? To be official?" "I don't know what I want." Mira picked up Kael, who immediately nuzzled into her neck. "I just want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for someone to realize I don't belong and send me away." "That's never going to happen," Darius said from the doorway. Both women turned to look at him. He stepped into the room, his expression serious. "Mira, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. But there's a spring." "Gathering in 2 weeks. Every noble family in the Northern Territories will attend. Every alpha, every beta, every wolf of importance." He moved closer. "I want to present you." "Present me?" Mira's heart started racing. "What does that mean?" "It means making our bond official." Darius took her free hand. "It means claiming you as my mate before the kingdom. It means making you a queen." The room spun. Mira sat down hard in a nearby chair, still clutching Kael. "A queen?" "Co-queen," Selene clarified, kneeling beside her. "We'd rule together, the 3 of us. It's rare, but not unheard of in Lycan history. Darius's great-grandfather had 2 mates. They ruled for 60 years, brought unprecedented peace to the territories." "I can't be a queen," Mira protested. "I don't know how. I don't have the training, the bloodline, You have the bond," Darius interrupted. "You have the love of the crown prince. You have the respect you've earned through your actions. That's more than enough." "What will the nobles say?" "Some will object," Darius admitted. "Some will see you as an outsider, an Omega who doesn't deserve the title. But they'll accept it, or they'll leave my court. I won't tolerate disrespect toward my mate." Mira looked at Selene. "And you? You're really okay with this? More than okay. Selene smiled. Mira, you've become my dearest friend, my sister. The idea of sharing this life with you, of ruling beside you, of raising Kael together. It's everything I didn't know I wanted. Kael chose that moment to grab Mira's braid and tug, babbling happily. All three adults laughed, the tension breaking. He's voting, yes, Darius observed. He doesn't get a vote, Mira protested weakly. Sure he does. Darius crouched down so he was eye level with Mira. But so do you. What do you want, Mira? Not what you think you should want, not what you think you deserve. What do you actually want? Mira looked at him, this fierce king who'd somehow become hers. She looked at Selene, this radiant queen who'd welcomed her with open arms. She looked at Kael, this precious pup who'd brought her back to life, and she thought about her cottage, cold and lonely, compared to this palace full of warmth and family and love. I want this, she whispered. I want all of this. I want to be your mate. I want to help raise Kael. I want to be part of this family. She looked up at Darius, tears in her eyes. I want to be brave enough to believe I deserve it. Darius pulled her up, Kael still in her arms, and kissed her. Not gentle like before, but fierce, claiming a kiss that made her toes curl and her heart soar. When they broke apart, Selene was crying too, happy tears streaming down her face. Then it's settled, Darius said, his voice rough with emotion. In 2 weeks, we will make you a queen. The next 14 days were chaos. Seamstresses appeared with fabrics and measuring tapes. Teachers drilled her on protocol and proper address. Selene coached her through meeting nobles and remembering names. Darius taught her the history of the territories, the major family lines, and the political alliances that kept peace. Mira's head spun with information, but she absorbed it all like a plant starving for sunlight. She learned quickly, her mind sharp despite years of disuse. The servants stopped looking at her with uncertainty and started bowing with respect. The nobles who visited started using her title, Lady Mira, mate-to-be of the Lycan King. But on the night before the gathering, Mira stood in front of her mirror and saw only the broken Omega she'd always been. The gown they'd made for her was beautiful, silver and white, with delicate embroidery, but she felt like a fraud wearing it. Her hair was styled elegantly, but she could still see the girl who'd cut it herself with dull scissors. Her face was clean and glowing from expensive creams, but underneath she was still damaged, still defective. A knock on her door made her turn. Selene entered, already dressed for tomorrow in a gown of deep blue. She took one look at Mira's face and understood. Having second thoughts, third and fourth thoughts. Mira laughed shakily. Selene, what if I fail? What if I make a mistake tomorrow and embarrass Darius? What if the nobles reject me and it causes problems for the kingdom? Then we handle it together. Selene moved to stand beside her at the mirror. Look at us, Mira. Really look. Mira looked. She saw Selene, tall and regal, born to be queen, and she saw herself, shorter, softer, uncertain. They couldn't be more different. I see a strong Omega who survived the impossible, Selene said softly. I see a woman who saved my son's life. I see someone brave enough to love when she thought she'd never be loved. I see a queen, Mira. Why can't you? Because queens aren't broken. Every queen is broken. Selene took her hand. I lost 3 babies before Kael. 3 tiny lives that never took a breath. I was broken after each one, shattered, certain I'd failed as a mate and a queen. But Darius and I put each other back together, piece by piece. That's what love does. It doesn't fix us. It helps us carry our broken pieces until they don't hurt so much anymore. Mira's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. Good. Selene smiled. So was I before my coronation. So is everyone before they step into something bigger than themselves. Fear means it matters. Use it. That night, for the first time, Mira didn't sleep alone. Selene stayed with her, the two of them lying in the big bed, talking until dawn about everything and nothing, about hopes and fears, about Kael's future, about what it would be like to rule together. And when the sun rose on the day of the gathering, Mira felt ready. The great hall was transformed. Hundreds of candles lit the space, making everything glow golden. Flowers imported from the southern territories created archways of color. Long tables groaned under the weight of food, and wolves, so many wolves, filled every available space. Alphas in their finest clothes, betas displaying their pack colors, omegas dressed in silk and jewels. Mira stood in a side chamber, waiting for her cue, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear the music starting in the hall. Darius appeared beside her, magnificent in black and silver, his crown catching the light. "You look terrified," he observed. "I am terrified." "Good." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Channel it. Let them see you're nervous. It makes you real, human. The nobles don't trust perfection. What if they hate me? Some will." Darius's silver eyes were serious. "Some will hate that an Omega is being elevated. Some will think you're a manipulator who seduced me. Some will simply hate change. But their hatred doesn't define you, Mira. Your actions do. Your heart does. And I've seen both. They're worthy of a crown." The doors to the hall opened. Music swelled. Darius offered his arm, and Mira took it, her legs shaking. They walked together into that golden room, into a sea of watching eyes and whispered judgments. Mira kept her head high, remembering Selene's coaching. Shoulders back, eyes forward, small smile. At the far end of the hall, Selene waited on a raised platform, Kael in her arms. She smiled at Mira, warm and encouraging. They reached the platform, and Darius led Mira up the steps. The music stopped. The whispers faded. Silence fell like a blanket over the gathered wolves. Darius's voice rang out clear and commanding. "Wolves of the northern territories, I present to you Lady Mira, savior of Crown Prince Kael, chosen mate of your king, your new queen." The silence stretched. Mira felt every eye on her, weighing her, judging her. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single voice called out, "She's an Omega. An Omega can't be queen." Other voices joined in, a rising tide of protest. Mira's hands shook. This was it. The rejection she'd been waiting for. The proof that she didn't belong. But Darius's hand covered hers, steady and warm, and Selene moved to her other side, a united front. Kael, sensing the tension, started to fuss. Without thinking, Mira took him from Selene, holding him close, soothing him with practiced ease. The pup settled immediately, curling against her chest. "You question her rank," Darius said, his voice cutting through the protests. "You question her bloodline. You question her worthiness." He paused, letting the silence build. "Then let me tell you what I know. This Omega survived 5 years alone in conditions that kill strong alphas. This Omega found my son dying in the snow and brought him back from death with nothing but her will and her breath. This Omega has loved and protected your prince, asking nothing in return. If that's not worthy of a crown, then I don't know what is." "She's weak," another voice shouted. "Her lungs are damaged. She can't even shift properly. What kind of queen can't fight for her kingdom?" Mira felt the words like physical blows. But before she could respond, Selene stepped forward. "I can't bear strong children," Selene said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I lost 3 babies before Kael. By your logic, that makes me unworthy too. Should I step down?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one dared say yes. "Queens aren't just fighters," Selene continued. "They're nurturers, healers, diplomats, leaders. Mira has already proven herself in all these ways. She doesn't need your approval to be worthy. She already is." An older alpha stepped forward from the crowd, his grey hair marking him as an elder. "The Lycan King has the right to choose his mates. That is our law, unchanged for 1,000 years. We may not like his choice, but we have no grounds to reject it." He bowed to Mira. "Welcome, Queen Mira." Others began to bow. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to show that she had support, that she had a chance. Mira's eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. The ceremony proceeded. A priestess came forward with a silver crown, smaller than Selena's and Darius's, but no less beautiful. She placed it on Mira's head, while speaking ancient words, in a language Mira didn't know. The weight of it was surprising, heavier than she'd expected. "Do you swear to protect the Northern Territories?" the priestess asked. "I swear." Mira's voice only shook a little. "Do you swear to honor the crown and the kingdom?" "I swear." "Do you swear to love and cherish your mates and your people until death?" Mira looked at Darius, then at Selene. Both smiled at her, love clear in their eyes. She looked down at Kael, still peaceful in her arms. "I swear." Then by the power of the moon and stars, by the ancient laws of Lycan kind, I declare you Queen Mira of the Northern Territories. May your reign be long and blessed." The hall erupted. Some cheered, some remained silent, but Mira didn't care about those who doubted. She cared about the 3 people on this platform with her, the family she'd found when she'd stopped looking, the love she'd discovered when she'd stopped believing she deserved it. The feast afterward was overwhelming. Nobles approached to offer congratulations, though many felt forced. Mira smiled and thanked them all, her jaw aching from maintaining proper etiquette. Darius and Selene flanked her, a united front against any who would challenge her place. But then an older woman approached, her clothes marking her as high nobility. She looked at Mira with cold eyes. "I knew your mother," she said without preamble. Mira froze. "What? Your mother?" "Elena. She was Omega too, mated to a beta from my territory." The woman's lip curled. "She abandoned you when you were damaged, didn't she? Cast you out because you weren't perfect." Shame flooded through Mira. She'd never told anyone about her mother, about that final conversation before she was left alone. "My mother made her choice," Mira said quietly. "I've made mine." "Have you?" The woman leaned in. "Or are you just another Omega playing at being more than she is? How long before you realize you don't belong here? How long before you run back to your cottage in the woods?" Darius moved to intervene, but Mira stopped him with a hand on his arm. She looked at this noble woman, at the cruelty in her eyes, and something inside her snapped. Not with anger, but with clarity. "My mother believed I was broken," Mira said, her voice carrying to the wolves around them. "She believed damaged lungs made me worthless. She believed an Omega who couldn't shift properly had no value. And for 5 years, I believed her. I lived in that cottage, thinking I deserved nothing more than survival." She held up Kael, who babbled happily in her arms. "But this pup taught me something. When I found him dying in the snow, I didn't think about my damaged lungs. I didn't think about being weak or defective. I just acted. I saved him because he needed me. After all, love doesn't wait for you to be perfect before it demands action." Mira stepped closer to the woman. "So yes, I'm an Omega. Yes, I'm damaged. Yes, I came from nothing. But I'm also a mother to a prince. I'm also a mate to a king. I'm also a queen now, not because I was perfect, but because I was brave enough to love when it was hard. If you can't respect that, then I pity you." The woman's face flushed red. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked away. The wolves who'd gathered to watch erupted in whispers. Some looked impressed, others looked scandalized. But Mira didn't care. She'd spoken her truth, and it felt like freedom. Darius pulled her close, kissing her temple. "That was magnificent. That was terrifying," Mira corrected, but she smiled. The gathering continued late into the night. Mira danced with Darius, his strong arms guiding her through steps she barely knew. She danced with Celine too, both of them laughing when they stumbled. She met nobles who were kind and nobles who were cold, and learned to navigate both with equal grace. But the best moment came near midnight, when the formal festivities ended and the three of them returned to their quarters. Mira expected to go to her room, to end the night as she'd ended every night, alone. But Darius took her hand and led her to the master chambers, Selene on her other side. "You don't have to sleep alone anymore," Selene said softly, "unless you want to, but we'd like you to stay." Mira looked at the massive bed, big enough for three, and felt her last wall crumble. "I'd like to stay." That night, she fell asleep between her mates, Kael in a crib beside the bed, and felt truly home for the first time in her life. Darius's arm was heavy across her waist, Celine's hand was tangled in her hair, and Mira, the broken Omega who'd lived alone for 5 years, finally understood what it meant to belong. The months that followed weren't easy. The nobles who'd protested her coronation didn't suddenly accept her. There were whispers, rumors, and small acts of disrespect. But Mira handled each one with the same quiet strength she'd shown at the gathering. She didn't fight with anger or force. She fought with competence, proving through actions that she deserved her crown. She established a healing house in the capital, using her knowledge of herbs to treat wolves who couldn't afford royal healers. She mediated disputes between minor nobles, her Omega instincts for peacemaking making her surprisingly effective. She spent hours each week in the nursery with Kael, making sure the prince knew he was loved beyond measure. And slowly, grudgingly, the kingdom came to accept her. Not all of them, never all of them, but enough. The common wolves loved her because she came from nothing, as they did. The healers respected her knowledge. The diplomats appreciated her skill at negotiation. Even some of the nobles who'd opposed her began to bow with genuine respect instead of forced politeness. But the real change came 6 months after her coronation, on a cold winter morning, when Mira woke up feeling strange. Not sick, just different. Celine took one look at her face and knew. "You're pregnant," she said, her eyes going wide. Mira's hand flew to her stomach. "I can't be. My lungs, the damage. The healers said..." "The healers were wrong." Celine pulled her into a fierce hug. "You're pregnant, Mira. You're going to have a baby." The news spread through the palace like wildfire. Darius was jubilant, picking Mira up and spinning her despite her protests about her condition. Kael, now a boisterous toddler, seemed to understand something important was happening and stayed close to Mira, protective even at his young age. But with joy came fear. Mira's damaged lungs made pregnancy risky. The healers warned that carrying a child might strain her body beyond its limits. There was a chance, they said carefully, that she might not survive the birth. "Then we end it," Darius said immediately when they received the news. "We stop the pregnancy. I won't lose you, Mira. I won't." "No." Mira's hand covered her still flat stomach. "No, I want this baby. I want to give you and Selena a child. I want Kael to have a sibling. I want this." "Not if it costs your life," Selena argued, tears in her eyes. "Mira, please. We love you too much to lose you. You won't lose me." Mira took both their hands, pressing them to her stomach. "I survived 5 years alone in brutal winters. I survived being abandoned and broken and told I was worthless. I survived finding a dying pup and bringing him back to life when I could barely breathe myself. I'll survive this too. I promise." The pregnancy was hard. Mira's lungs struggled with the extra strain. There were days she couldn't leave bed, days when every breath was agony, days when the healers looked at each other with worry in their eyes. But she endured, because she'd endured worse, and because she had something she'd never had before, people to fight for. Darius barely left her side. He held her hand through the painful nights, carried her when she was too weak to walk, and read to her when she couldn't sleep. Celine brought her special teas and soft blankets, sat with her for hours, and shared her own fears about childbirth and motherhood. And Kael, sweet Kael, would curl up next to her on the bed, his small presence a comfort. 7 months into the pregnancy, a delegation arrived from the Eastern Territories. They requested an audience with the King and Queens to discuss a border dispute that had been festering for years. Mira was in no condition to attend, but she insisted. "I'm a queen," she told Darius when he protested. "I can't hide every time something is difficult. The kingdom needs to see that I'm strong enough to rule even now." So she attended, dressed in a gown that accommodated her swollen belly, her crown on her head, determination in her eyes. The Eastern delegation was led by an alpha named Garrett, a notorious hardliner who'd opposed every attempt at negotiation. "I heard rumors the Northern Territories had an Omega Queen," Garrett said, his tone mocking. "But I had to see it to believe it. And pregnant, too. How domestic." Mira felt Darius tense beside her, felt Selena's hand tighten on the armrest, but she spoke before either could respond. "Alpha Garrett," she said calmly. "You came to discuss the border dispute, not my domestic situation. Shall we begin?" For 3 hours, they negotiated. Garrett tried every tactic to unsettle Mira, from veiled insults to outright threats. But she remained calm, using her Omega instincts to read his emotions, to find the compromises he could accept without losing face. By the end, they'd reached an agreement that gave both territories what they needed. As the delegation prepared to leave, Garrett approached Mira. He studied her for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the room. He bowed. "I came here thinking an Omega Queen was an insult to Lycan tradition," he said. "I leave corrected. You have the strength of any alpha I've met, Queen Mira. Perhaps more, because yours comes not from force, but from wisdom. The Eastern Territories recognize your sovereignty." After they left, Mira collapsed. The strain of the meeting, combined with her pregnancy, was too much. She woke in her chambers with healers surrounding her and panic in Darius's eyes. "The baby," she gasped. "It's fine," the head healer assured her. "But you're not. Your lungs are failing, Mira. You need to stay in bed for the remaining weeks, or we'll lose both of you." So Mira stayed in bed, frustrated and frightened, while the kingdom went on without her. She listened to reports about border skirmishes and noble disputes, about harvest yields and trade agreements. She helped make decisions from her bed, proving that a queen could rule even when confined. But the hardest part was watching Kael grow and change while she couldn't play with him. He'd visit every day, climbing carefully onto her bed, telling her about his lessons and his adventures. And every day, Mira promised him she'd get better, that soon she'd be able to chase him through the gardens again. 2 months before her due date, Mira woke in the middle of the night with crushing pain in her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't call for help. Darius woke to find her gasping, her lips blue, her eyes wide with terror. The healers worked through the night, fighting to save her and the baby. Mira drifted in and out of consciousness, hearing voices arguing, feeling hands on her body, tasting blood in her mouth. At one point, she heard Selene sobbing, begging her not to leave. At another, she felt Darius's tears on her face as he held her hand and prayed to gods he didn't believe in. She dreamed she was back in her cottage, alone in the cold. She dreamed she was in the snow, searching for Kael, but unable to find him. She dreamed she was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into dark water. But then she felt it, a small flutter in her belly, a tiny kick, her baby, fighting just as hard as she was to survive. And Mira thought about Kael, about how she'd brought him back from death because she refused to give up, about how she'd survived 5 years of loneliness because she was stubborn and strong and unwilling to quit. She'd be damned if she quit now. Mira opened her eyes. The room came into focus slowly. Healers surrounded her, working frantically. Darius gripped one hand, Selene the other. Both looked destroyed, aged years in a single night. "I'm here," Mira whispered. "I'm still here." Darius's sob was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. The baby came early, 2 months before schedule, delivered by emergency surgery, while Mira was barely conscious. She heard a cry, thin and weak, and managed to rasp out a single question. "Alive?" "Alive," the healer confirmed. "A daughter, small, but alive." They brought her to Mira, a tiny thing with a dusting of dark hair and her father's silver eyes. She was so small, she fit in Mira's 2 hands, but she was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Luna," Mira whispered, the name coming to her like a gift. "Her name is Luna." Recovery was slow and painful. Mira's lungs had been damaged further by the pregnancy. She would never breathe easily again, would always struggle with physical exertion. But she'd survived, and so had Luna. And that was all that mattered. The kingdom celebrated the birth of a princess for a week straight. Gifts poured in from every territory. Even the nobles who'd opposed Mira's coronation sent congratulations, acknowledging that an Omega who could survive such a pregnancy and still rule was worthy of respect. But the best moment came a month after Luna's birth, when Mira was finally strong enough to hold both her children. Kael, now 3 years old, sat on one side, Luna cradled carefully in his small arms under Mira's watchful eye. And Mira thought about the girl she'd been, alone and broken in a cottage, certain she'd never have a family. "What are you thinking?" Darius asked, settling beside her on the bed. "That I was wrong." Mira leaned into him, watching Selene make silly faces at Luna to get her to smile. "All those years, I thought I was broken because of my lungs, because I couldn't shift right, because I was alone. But I wasn't broken, I was just waiting." "Waiting for what?" Selene asked, looking up with a smile. "For this." Mira gestured to all of them, her strange, perfect family. "For you, for them, for home." "You were never broken," Darius said, kissing her temple. "You were always whole. You just needed us to help you see it." That night, after the children were asleep and Selene had gone to check on the nursery, Mira stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the kingdom. Her kingdom now. She wore a simple nightgown, her crown set aside, her hair loose. She looked like the Omega she'd been, but she felt like the queen she'd become. Darius joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving your cottage, taking on all this responsibility?" Mira thought about her answer carefully. "I regret the pain. I regret how hard it was. But regret leaving." She turned in his arms to face him. "Never, because that cottage wasn't a home. It was a place I survived. This is a place I live." "I love you," Darius said, and Mira heard everything in those 3 words. The gratitude for saving Kael, the respect for her strength, the awe at her survival, the simple, powerful truth of his heart. "I love you too," Mira replied. And then, because she could, because she was allowed, because she was no longer alone, she added, "I love all of this, every hard, beautiful, impossible bit of it." They stood there as the moon rose over the palace, 2 mates who'd found each other through tragedy and blood, and a tiny pup dying in the snow. And Mira knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. 3 years later, Mira stood in the great hall once more, but this time she wasn't being crowned. This time, she was the one placing a crown on someone else's head. A young Omega from the southern territories who'd distinguished herself in healing, who'd saved dozens of lives during a plague, who reminded Mira so much of herself, it hurt. "The kingdom needs healers in positions of power," Mira said, her voice carrying through the hall. "We need voices that understand pain, that have survived it, that can use that survival to help others. Rise, Lady Elena, chief healer of the Northern Territories. The young Omega rose, tears streaming down her face, and Mira saw herself in those tears, saw the disbelief, the wonder, the sudden understanding that you could be broken and still be worthy. After the ceremony, the Omega approached Mira hesitantly. "Your Majesty," she said, "how did you do it? How did you go from nothing to this?" Mira smiled, thinking about all the moments that had led her here. The frozen pup in the snow, the Lycan King at her door, the choice to trust, to love, to believe she deserved more than survival. "I learned that broken isn't the same as worthless," Mira said. "I learned that survival is its own kind of strength, and I learned that sometimes the family you find is stronger than the family you're born to." She gestured to where Darius and Selene stood with Kael and Luna, her perfect, chaotic, beautiful family. "But most importantly," Mira continued, "I learned to save myself before I could save anyone else, even if that meant accepting help to do it." The young Omega nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes, and Mira knew she'd be okay, just like Mira had been okay, just like all the broken wolves who found their way home eventually were okay. That night, Mira wrote a letter. She'd been writing it in her head for years, but only now felt strong enough to put it on paper. It was addressed to her mother, to Elena, to the woman who'd abandoned her because she was damaged. She wrote about survival and strength. She wrote about finding love when she'd stopped looking for it. She wrote about her children, her mates, her crown. But mostly, she wrote about forgiveness. Not because her mother deserved it, but because Mira deserved to let go of the anger. She ended the letter with a single line. "You were wrong about me. I was never broken. I was just waiting to bloom." She didn't send it. She burned it in the fireplace, watching the words turn to ash, releasing them into the universe. Her mother would never read them, would never know what Mira had become. And that was okay, because Mira didn't need her mother's approval anymore. She had her own. If you've been following Mira's incredible journey from that frozen moment by the stream to becoming a queen and mother, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt broken, only to discover you were just waiting for the right moment to bloom? And if you enjoyed this story of survival, love, and finding family in unexpected places, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps me create more stories of transformation and hope. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that broken things can still be beautiful. 10 years after finding Kael in the snow, Mira stood in the same spot where it all began. The stream bubbled beside her, ice forming at its edges as winter approached once again. But this time she wasn't alone. Kael stood beside her, now a young man of 13, tall and strong, with his father's silver eyes and his mother's grace. Luna, 10 years old, chased butterflies that shouldn't still be alive this late in the season, her laughter echoing through the trees. "Is this really where you found me?" Kael asked, looking at the snowdrift that had nearly been his grave. "Right there." Mira pointed. "You weren't breathing. You were so cold. I thought I was too late." Kael was quiet for a moment, studying the spot. "What made you save me? You didn't know I was a prince. You didn't know father would come for me. Why risk your life for a stranger?" Mira thought about her answer. "Because you needed me, and I needed you, though I didn't know it then. I was so lonely, Kael, so certain I had nothing to offer the world. But you gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to be brave." "I don't remember any of it," Kael admitted. "But I'm glad you found me. I'm glad you didn't give up." "Me too." Mira pulled him into a hug, this boy who'd saved her as much as she'd saved him. "Me too, my warrior." Luna ran up to them, breathless and glowing. "Mama, I found a nest. There are baby birds in it." "Show me." Mira said, letting Luna pull her through the trees. Kael followed, and together they examined the nest, these 3 wolves who'd formed their own pack within a pack. As the sun set over the forest, painting everything gold and red, Mira thought about how far she'd come. From a broken Omega who lived alone to a queen with a family. From a woman who believed she was worthless to one who knew her value. From someone who'd stopped hoping to someone who believed in happy endings. She'd found her prince in the snow, but more than that, she'd found herself. And that, Mira thought as she walked home to her palace with her children, was the real fairy tale.